This is episode 20 of Youthful Perspectives. I'm your host, Mason Beerbaum. My guest today is Andrea Hansen-Miller, the senior social worker at the Minneapolis Central Library. With housing affordability being one of the most important issues within America, Andrea is at the center of this issue in one of Minnesota's most populous areas, Hennepin County. Helping to secure housing for those experiencing homelessness, qualifying individuals for social benefits they didn't realize they were eligible for, and allowing people to vent in her office is just another day on the job for Andrea. Our conversation covers homelessness and housing affordability through a nuanced perspective on an issue many Americans care deeply about. I hope you come away with as much new information as I did. And now, here is Andrea Hansen-Miller. You currently serve as the senior social worker at the Minneapolis Central Library. How would you describe your role, and why is your work important to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am a senior social worker, and I am part of the housing stability kind of section of Hennepin County, specifically on the homeless to housing team and on the homeless access team. So the homeless access team basically has some like specialized social workers that focus on specific populations. So we have a couple folks who specifically work with the veteran population, the unsheltered population, elderly, homeless individuals. And then my specialty is library social work. And so I'm fully embedded at Minneapolis Central Library. And my role here is really to provide services to individuals where individuals are already going for, services, information. Let's see here. I provide a lot of drop-in services, so people can come and see me however and whenever they are ready to meet with me. Sometimes I offer snacks, and sometimes I will meet with folks and I can help them sign up for benefits, or we'll do housing needs assessments, getting people on public housing, helping them with energy assistance applications, really just kind of like whatever is needed in that moment to start moving forward. Even though I'm on the housing stability team, I don't necessarily have to focus on housing with each individual. And so I tie things back to housing a lot because you need income for housing. And so it's like economic benefits are like a step towards housing. So there's some of that also kind of goes.
You're like a Swiss Army knife.
Yes.
Very versatile.
Yes,
in the
it's very
services
much,
you provide.
Yeah, very much jack of all trades.
Yeah, absolutely. What caused you to go into social work?
What caused me to go into social work? So when I was younger, my family is family of teachers.
That makes two of us.
Yes. Yeah. And so in my head, I always had this idea of wanting to teach. And then I was like, I want to teach, but not in like traditional settings. And so I kind of like started exploring like, well, what does that actually look like if you're not a teacher? And, really kind of like looking at certain populations and being like, navigating, like being side by side with an individual and navigating services and like navigating, like opening up doors that people may have known were there, but didn't know how to access, or like weren't in a spot to be able to access that themselves. As a social worker, like I was getting more involved in the homeless population. And so that really spurred me into wanting to become a social worker.
Was there a specific instance or any other underlying motivations that specifically led you to work specifically with homeless people and people experiencing homelessness?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. Initially, so I fully believe in individuals' rights to self-determination and self-actualization. And that's like a really important part of being human. And I think I was really driven to work with individuals who are experiencing homelessness, because it's a lot of fun. Like it's just like a population that I think so many people don't realize, like they are humans. They have interests. Like they want to have fun just like we want to have fun. And their stories are just fascinating, like their past lives that they've had. And so I really got interested in just kind of like this idea of being able to help individuals who are homeless with accessing those services and being able to like get their basic needs met so they can fully realize whatever goals they have in life and being there to support that. And I think that was like ultimately what got me into working with like more broadly the homeless population. Originally, I started working with youth that were homeless at a youth shelter in Eugene when I was living in Eugene and doing some of like the crisis work. So we would do like the crisis phones and then the shelter stays, and then also doing mediation between families on what can we kind of like work on here to get the kiddo back at home, or what types of housing programs are out there that we can start working towards because your natural support system just isn't available to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
What was it like working on the crisis phones? That has to have been a very stressful job, I would imagine.
You know, I really like crisis work because there's an arc to it, and you're really able to focus on like one thing at hand. There might be 100 different things that they bring up in the phone call, but essentially there's like one issue that's really prompting them to call at that time, and being able to focus on that and allow space for the individual to really come up with their own plan and guiding that is a lot of fun. I really like crisis work because, of the arc, and you can see, individuals will call in distress, but it's like you're kind of like that ring of hope in that time. And sometimes people just need that connection point to be able to get through what they're going through.
That has to be a lot of pressure that puts on yourself when you're that ring of hope that they are looking for. And I feel like if you're dealing with that constantly day after day after day, that would get quite stressful, like I mentioned before. But it seems like things that would push people away from that sort of work is what reinvigorates you to keep on doing it. That sense that you are that hope, that person that resolves the issue for them. So it's very, very admirable work. But I was struck by one thing you mentioned earlier, talking about working with homeless people, the motivation to almost, for lack of a better word, dehumanize those that are experiencing homelessness, or not look at them as an equal in that way. And I'm sure many people that have experienced homelessness, or not necessarily directly, but have witnessed it on the streets, cross the street or whatever, not think about that person. But that was a kid at one point that had hopes and dreams, and had very human experience, but something went awry in their life. And I think that's an important thing to remember when dealing with homelessness and seeing it in your day-to-day life, is to remember that that's a human after all, that for one way or another ended up going on the wrong track of life and end up in this current situation. Because I think it's a very tempting thing to fall into that mindset, to just it's almost like you're suppressing that emotion to feel bad for them, I think, because some people, it's so apparent in some parts of America that they just suppress it and don't want to deal with it. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's very important.
Yeah. I think like one of the things that especially in this job, that I've also really noticed is that could be me. That could be you. Like the stories that I hear about, people being, top in their business, and then just losing everything, and now they're homeless, and it's just like, that could be me, it's very humanizing to actually sit down and hear people's stories.
Absolutely. And we'll come back to that topic later on in the conversation. You work for Hennepin County. What is one thing Hennepin County does well in terms of treating homelessness, and what's one thing they could do better?
Oh, man. Hennepin County is, I will just say, they are like the leading in so many ways in kind of addressing homelessness in our area. Just like from leadership down, there is so much support and in like the programs that I'm part of. And they are really getting out there and making sure that we have funding available to ensure that there's staff specifically there to work with individuals experiencing homelessness to get out. We have people who are specifically trying to, make sure that emergency rents can be paid so people can stay in their housing, continually adding deeply affordable housing for people experiencing homelessness so they can get into housing, but also stay in that housing long term. And then within that housing, having the support services in place. We also have like the Streets to Housing team, which is out, they're outside and they're part of like the encampments. They're making sure that like services are getting to people who may not be coming into the library, who may not be ready to engage in long-term case management, but getting them, into shelter, getting them housed straight from the encampments. Mm-hmm. So, yes, we like the big goal in Hennepin County is to keep homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring.
Yes.
And so those are kind of like the three arms, and they weave together really, really nicely. And yeah, I think just like Hennepin County in general does just an amazing job. And that's shown at conferences around the country. They look to Hennepin County and say like, what are you doing? Because you are actually successfully getting people housed and keeping them housed. Mm-hmm. Like our program has a 96% retention rate, which means, wow, those individuals are housed a year after us helping them get housed. And that's just like unheard of.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. Mm-hmm. And that's great to hear that Hennepin County is one of the leading examples within the country when it comes to that. But from your position, is there anything that you see Hennepin County could do a better job at?
I think, and this isn't even just Hennepin County, this is nationwide, is just like access to affordable housing. Mm-hmm. Like we need to have housing. Like how do you solve homelessness? You solve homelessness by housing people,
right.
And
providing homes.
Yes, exactly. Like otherwise, like that. It's part of the name.
Exactly.
So I think like that's the really big thing is that while the county is building these programs and thinking in super creative ways on like single room occupancies and kind of like renovating the hotels from the COVID times so that now they are single room occupancies for individuals to live in, increasing just like having housing available for all levels of income is just, it's essential, and we always need more of it.
I know I've been wondering you mentioned COVID and how that kind of changed a lot of things within the country, especially when it comes to homelessness too. And you hear a lot of people moving to hybrid work or virtual work because of that. And I know we're recording this in downtown Minneapolis where there's a lot of empty office spaces because of COVID. And if there was a way where you could transform those empty office spaces into affordable housing like that, I think there's ample opportunity.
Yes.
But it's a matter of if you can get around the red tape that comes with it too, and making sure it's up to code. Because I remember I read a book by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson called Abundance, and they mentioned how these empty office spaces are a perfect opportunity to increase a lot more supply into the housing market.
Yeah.
But because there's so many different regulations that they have to, check off in order to make sure that they're certified for people to live in, there's so much lag time behind that. And, as you experience on a day-to-day basis working with homeless people, I mean, one day to another, you never know what's going to happen with that regard. So if there's a way for us to resolve that issue, I think we'd be heading in the right direction. I hope people that have the power to do something like that are looking into ways to solve that too. And I also have thought about perhaps if I remember hearing this when I was younger, taking, I think it was shipping containers that aren't used anymore and perhaps transforming them to like tiny units.
Homes?
I don't know if that's a viable option or not, but people are dire right now for solutions. So if anything can help at this point, we'll take it.
And what's really cool is, Minneapolis does have a building. I think it's the North Star Center, where it was an office building, and they're remodeling it into apartments. I don't know where it's at in the process, but I do know that that's happening. And then we do have a Minnesotan version of tiny homes. It's inside. It's called a Vivo Village, and it's really designed for like people who would otherwise not be accessing shelter. So people who are unsheltered, they're in the encampments, might have multiple barriers to accessing shelter, like having pets, or they might be a couple, and they're like little containers that are inside, and people have their own lock, and they still like have shared, like meals and bathrooms and things like that. But it's really cool to see how they're doing that. I'm a big fan of tiny homes, mainly because in Eugene, that was like a very big thing. The Conestoga huts was like, something that we would help build, and we would find the partnerships to find like the land and the churches willing to have them on site. And
Yeah. I said,
tiny homes.
Yeah, I do too. It seems like there's a lot of potential with that. From your work, what are the main reasons people become homeless in Hennepin County?
Goes back to, homelessness. There's lack of affordable housing. So many people, it's just the rent, is so high. They're working, all of a sudden their hours get cut, and they are having a hard time being able to pay that rent. I think a lot of times it's not just like one thing, right? I think that I see in so many people that there's multiple things that ultimately lead to their homelessness. So the rent is too high, they lose their job. They get a divorce, so now they also don't have that other income. They rely on their family members to be able to cover rent for a period of time, or move in with family for a period of time, and then that family is no longer able to support, or they don't have a support system in place. But I think like a lot of it is just like that erosion of access to just like the natural supports that ultimately will lead to homelessness.
Yeah.
And then finding housing once you're homeless, it can be very difficult.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. What are some of the biggest misconceptions surrounding homelessness in Hennepin County?
Oh, geez, misconceptions. I feel like we kind of talked about this earlier. I think people want to other individuals who are homeless because that helps them feel safer in their own position. And I think that commonly, like you hear it on the news, you hear the sound bites on, like the substance use and mental health and crime and things like that. And like, that's just not, that's not who people who are homeless, like, that's not them. Mm-hmm. Like, they have stories, like, so many people say, like, they wanted to be closer to their family, and so they're in Minneapolis so they can kind of like reconnect with their children and their grandchildren. You know, they are educated. You know, I just think they do follow the news. And that's something that I always find so fascinating is how many times people come into my office and they are reading the news before I even know about something and are ready to address like changes in SNAP work requirements, or they're on the websites, they're able to access information and noticing discrepancies in how, you know, in updates that I didn't even know were there. So I think that, you know, they are people and they really do have a desire to like live a life. And it's really hard when every single day you're trying to figure out where you're going to sleep, where you're going to eat, you know, where you're going to go to be safe, the library. It's really hard to move beyond just your basic needs.
Right.
And that's what people see is the basic needs.
Yeah. I guess for myself, I didn't really think that was the case that people that are experiencing homelessness would be tapped into the news like that. And
Yeah.
certain things like the SNAP benefits, like you mentioned, that's been in the news for the last year or so, it seems like. And that would 100% affect them, I could imagine. So, yeah, that's cool to hear that they're more educated than one would think if they didn't know that to begin with. And I know my mom was here at the library, I think it was last week, if I remember correctly, and she was part of a singing group that they had practicing here. And she said one of the people experiencing homelessness that was in the group was able to call out which key they were in as they were singing. So it'd be like G, A, B, just because of the change of their voices. So like, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
I would never be able to do something like that. And you wouldn't think, people probably wouldn't think that someone experiencing homelessness would be able to do something like that. But like you said, they're their own individual that have their own individual stories. And it's not appropriate or good to just cast that stereotype towards them that they wouldn't be able to do something like that.
Yeah.
So that's super cool to hear.
And that's what's fun about the library is I get to see folks access like the different programs and like services that we have here. But like we have a guy who is an amazing piano player and will, you know, reserve the piano room just to like play piano. And it's just like, it's always so great when the other parts of an individual can kind of shine, because that's like it's a great reminder, I think, that they're not just homeless and it's not just like this constant depressing state that they're in. Like they can find joy in their music playing. They can find joy in playing chess every single week, all day, right? And that's really important as a human being to be able to express that joy and to find that joy. Because without that, that's kind of like the ring of hope, right? Like those are moments that kind of keep people going and can also be kind of the catapult to receiving services and accessing housing. Like I have one woman, right? Like cooking is like her big thing. She loves the cookbooks here. And it's like, that's how we talk about housing, is being able to find your own apartment where you can go and you can use these cookbooks again and cook for yourself, because you don't get to when you're staying in the shelter.
I was curious too, since we're in Hennepin County, obviously in Minneapolis, how does the change of seasons affect homeless people and therefore your work?
Yes. The seasons are it's always really interesting, because I actually, on my computer, I kind of like keep a track, especially when I first started, because I started noticing that there were different things that would happen in different seasons. Obviously, like the winter is really, really cold, and the summer is really, really hot. And so we have kind of these extremes that happen, and different, I mean, like there's different needs, right? Like we have to stay safe. You have to stay alive. And so in the wintertime, there's a really big push from individuals that come in and they're like, I need housing. I really can't do another winter outside. And so it feels like there's more pressure in the winter on securing housing, even though it takes, to get housed, even just like for us, right? Like you apply to an apartment, it's not like you move in that same day.
Right.
And so like there's times to really start working on that, and it takes a couple of months. And so it's like, okay, like if you're ready for housing now, we're looking at the end of the winter, but we can get you into a shelter right now. And at least you'll be warm and you don't have to worry about frostbite. That's like a really big thing, is just like the clothing drive that the sheriff's department kind of sponsors within the library is really essential. Just making sure that people have access to cold weather gear so that they can save their limbs. And then in the summertime, we're a cooling center. So wintertime, we're a warming center. Summertime, we're a cooling center where people can come and cool off because it can get so hot out. I do notice that in the spring, so as it gets nicer out, all of a sudden people will leave the library because you can access more. Like it's not so cold that you don't want to go outside. And so sometimes what happens is we're working on this goal and then it gets nice out and all of a sudden we're like, oh no, like I really hope they come back to the library in a couple of weeks once like they've really gotten to enjoy being outside and being, like enjoying the new weather. Because we can't really take a break if the ultimate goal is to get back into that apartment. So I noticed that a lot in the spring, and then the fall, it's just wet. And so that's kind of how we started the mending program that we have here. It's functional mending, and our Patrons Experiencing Homelessness Advisory Board really pushed for that, and just having a space where, we can waterproof shoes, we can fix the backpacks, we can re-sew the jackets, we can make sure that like the gear that they have will last for whatever season they're in. But yeah, the fall seems to be a really big time on just like staying dry, making sure that like your gear is working, and then really preparing for the winter.
Yeah. Have you noticed a decrease in the number of people that'll come into your office to talk about whatever issues might be bothering them from the transition of winter to spring, like that seasonal depression starts to alleviate? Have you noticed anything like that?
Yeah. And so like there's some folks that I only meet during the winter time. It's kind of like that is when they use the library. That's when they need the library, and that's okay. Like there's some people that I meet once and then I never see them again. And then what's really nice though is that whenever they come back, we can still work on the goals. Like it's not like it went away. Some opportunities may have gone away, but if they're ready now, we're going to start again and we're going to get the ball rolling. So it definitely happens where, we might be like this close to finally moving in, and then we get like the warmth comes and people just go back to what they do when it's warm out.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. I don't blame them. I know I want to certainly be outside enjoying
right?
the nice weather after this Minnesota winters. It's very tempting. Is there a common theme surrounding those who successfully get out of homelessness?
Ooh, a common theme. I like that question. A common theme for people who successfully get out of homelessness. I think that the real common theme is that they keep showing up. And they see themselves as being able to be housed. And I think that can be a long road for some people. For example, like I have been working with this guy for 3 years, and he sleeps outside. And we've had multiple housing opportunities within that past 3 years. And he just wasn't ready for them. He kept meeting with me. He knew that when he was ready to take that next step, that I was there, but I wasn't going to push him to make a decision that he didn't want to make, right? Like that's the self-determination. Like we all get to make decisions, whether or not other people think they're the right decisions, because I can't force somebody to access housing. And if you force somebody, are they going to be successful? Really cool thing. He is ready for housing now. We got him a housing referral. He can move in tomorrow. Like, it's just like he's at that part now where he sees himself as being ready to be housed and is doing it. Mm-hmm. And I think like, yeah, the common theme is just, having that like hope and belief that things will get better.
Yeah. That can apply to many things in life.
Yes.
Right there, to success ultimately coming your direction. Mm-hmm. So it's no surprise then that would also ring true when it comes to people getting out of homelessness as well. I was curious also about this. You mentioned shelters and pets and how sometimes that can be a point of conflict. Sometimes certain shelters don't allow pets to come in. When I was in San Diego a few years ago, I noticed many homeless people throughout the city had pets accompanying them, primarily dogs. And I'm curious if you've noticed any positive effects pets have on people experiencing homelessness.
Oh, man. Yeah. The pets. I mean, it really is emotional support. It's a buddy that's with you. And we all know dogs. Like, dogs are there. Like, they are unconditional, loving animals. And when you are in a position to feel really lonely and disconnected really from your natural supports, disconnected from participating fully in society, as an animal can be really helpful. Just like how, I have a cat and I don't really like my cat, but I like imagine going home and having a cat that wants to just like snuggle with you, right? And it's like that gets you through tough times. And the pets are just like sometimes, like it's just, the emotional aspect of it, but also just like safety, right? Mm-hmm. If you're sleeping outside, having an animal can create an alarm if something is, unsafe.
Yeah, a literal watchdog.
Yes.
In that sense, too. Have you noticed it giving people extra motivation to try to find housing as well so that their pet can be in a more stable environment as well?
Yes. I'm actually working with somebody right now that has a pet and is staying in shelter, but the dog is used to being housed. This man has become homeless within like the past couple of months. And so his pet doesn't really understand, right? Like at 7 a.m., you have to wake up every single day and leave the shelter. You're going to be sleeping with so many people. Like, it's just like, he was really motivated to find a place so that his dog would be able to kind of have that stability again and not be stressed out all of the time.
Yeah. You can imagine, obviously for myself, I'm only 21. I don't have a kid, but it would almost be similar to like if you have a kid and you're providing for that kid, you're going to pick up that extra shift at work so that kid might have the opportunity to have more Christmas presents come Christmas time. And that could be applied to making sure your pet is in a secure living environment, even if you might not necessarily need that for yourself at that time. So that's interesting to see that that's a way people are motivated in a positive manner
Yeah.
to find housing. How has social work and your social work skills, I should say, evolved over your career?
How have they evolved? Yes, they have evolved, definitely. I really like to think about how like I've learned that like being busy doesn't necessarily mean that you're being impactful or um you know, busy work is busy work. And I learned that I don't always have to be doing something. And that also is in reflection of other individuals. And so being able to just kind of like stop and do the slow roll with folks if that's what they're needing. Like, I can see an apartment that's available, but if they can't see that for themselves at that point in time, like that's cool. Let's just like make sure that you have access to food every day, and that is still eventually working on multiple goals, right? Because that's safety. That's like in the initial basic needs need to be met in order for people to kind of like move beyond, to the next level of like really being able to like realize their goals.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes it is just having the basic needs, like making sure that they're consistently just checking in. And then when they're ready to take the next step, knowing that I have like the resources available and like am capable of getting them connected, as soon as they're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a specific story you could share of someone successfully thriving from the services that you provided them?
I mean, so many. I mean, like one, let's see here. At this library, I helped 31 people secure housing last year.
Just last year?
Yeah, last year.
Wow.
So, I mean, that right there is a story, right? That's 31 different stories of like how they did that. For some, it was just helping them do a basic housing search and talking about the steps. I think, let's see here. I have one of my favorite stories that I think I frequently go back to is the first person I helped get housed. And this was back in 2022, but he came and he had a son and just needed like help. Like he had a fixed income, but really just didn't know where to start on finding an affordable apartment that him and his son could move into together. And I did a search with him, kind of figured out where he wanted to live, what was actually affordable for like the income he had, and printed out like two options. And he called one of them, did the tour, got housed almost immediately, which was awesome. Like he was able to just like get through that process. And then he consistently comes back every couple of months and will, like, I really have gotten to see his son grow up. Like, we check in about school. Like, we check in sometimes, after a couple of months, it was like, oh, you need another bed for your son because your son is now staying with you full time. And so it's like, how do we get you a bed? He's consistently paying his rent, has been in the same place for 3 years now. And just recently he came in saying he thinks he's ready to move to a different apartment. And so now we get to look to see if there's anything else available for him to do another step up, which is really cool. I think that story is just like, it's really fun because it actually has followed my entire career in the library. And it's like, it also shows how just because people get housed, like they still come and check in and they still see the library and then me within the library as a resource that they can access even after using the library as a drop-in center.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction to make as well, that just because you find a home eventually doesn't mean you can't come back to your office and still utilize the resources that you provide. I know I would have thought just once, if you're homeless, you would utilize the resources you provide, and then once you find a home, then you're on your own, you're good to go. But life ain't that simple, obviously. And so to find that extra help, like for this gentleman's case, and finding another apartment to move into, makes perfect sense why I'd come back and help you, because you obviously have ample experience when it comes to situations like that.
Yeah. I think it's funny too. I have another person just recently. I met him once in 2022 and basically just gave him a list of apartments to look at and never met him again. And all of a sudden, a couple of weeks ago, he called me and he specifically said, I was talking to my friend and I got your phone number from my friend because I thought you could help me in this situation. And he was at risk of losing his housing that he secured way back then. And I didn't know that it actually resulted in housing. Like I had just given him a sheet and never saw him again. But I think like that also is just so amazing that one little interaction that I had with him so long ago, when all of a sudden he was in a housing crisis, he was like, I know who I need to connect with because I think that person is going to help. And that's just so meaningful for me.
Yeah.
It's a win because he's not going to lose his housing because he reached out. And I so wish sometimes that people would reach out before they lost their housing, because it's like, if you call me now, we can do something about it. But on the flip end, sometimes I see people that have lost their housing and it's like, if only you had come in 2 weeks ago.
Right. That's kind of the essence of your job right there, it seems like, for people to follow up and ask for help again too. But you mentioned that being a win. And I'm curious, obviously you cited the 31 individuals who secured housing in the last year. Is there other ways you measure success in your field? In other words, what does a quote unquote win look like?
Yeah, what do wins look like? I mean, there's the big ones, like getting housed. I think there's also really little wins. And I mean, just a little win that happened just the other day is this person comes in and they were asking, there's like a laptop program through the Office of Broadband and Digital Inclusion, which is part of Hennepin County. So they wanted a free laptop. And I was like, well, do you have benefits? Because that's one of the eligibility requirements. No, I've never been able to actually get them. It's like, okay, well, you're in my office. I have a super streamlined way of doing this. And within 2 days, they now have food stamps and are now able to get that laptop that they're really wanting. And so just like coming into the office, little win is now they have a way to pay for their food, which is really cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm curious too, also with the amount of individuals you deal with on a day-to-day basis, an annual basis too, and different stories that they bring in, the amount of emotional stress they might be going through too. That has to take a toll on you, I would imagine, over the course of a period of time. So how do you handle the emotional toll of your job?
You know, that is like another part of like the evolution of my, social work, is really learning what I like to do and moving in that direction. Like I really like providing drop-in services. I really like that style of being able to help people when they are coming in and asking questions. And so long-term case management, that's not my thing really. Like long-term mental health, like I've been a counselor before, and those relationships can span years, and that's not kind of like what I see as fulfilling. And so finding the work that you really enjoy doing really helps with being able to take on that emotional toll. Obviously, having like the supports. I never imagined working for the government to be so supportive and amazing, but like Justin and Lynn and even, David, who's now moved up even more. It's just like the level of support in our program is unheard of. Like it's, everybody's on the same team and you can reach out to anybody. So if there really is something that I have to debrief, I can do that with a million different people on my team, and I know that they'll respond right away. I'm also really good at boundaries. I believe very strongly in professional boundaries, and I turn my phone off when I leave work. I turn my computer off when I leave work. I will not check it when I'm not at work, and that helps me, like, as a physical reminder at the end of the day. I'm like, okay, work stays at work. I need to, be my own person when I leave this area, and I get to enjoy life as well. Like work is just one part of what I do. It pays the bills. And I really, really love my work. And volleyball and being outside. Those are like essential.
What role has volleyball played in your life?
Oh man, volleyball's always been there. I think volleyball is, it's a great release. It's a team, right? And so like you have like your group that is just like you're connected with them throughout the years, like they're my friends. We get to play together. We get to talk about things that are going on, but also like I can just play volleyball and not have to think about everything else going on. I always think of how my evolution within volleyball is also kind of like a fun story, but being able to play as an adult has gotten me through so many really difficult times.
Yeah, I could imagine there's a lot of similarities between the work environment you're describing here at the library and being on a sports team. There's a lot of camaraderie, shared experiences, working towards common goals like that. I'm a huge proponent of playing sports. I've said it on the podcast before, and I'll say it again now. The amount of life lessons I learned from just high school sports. When I played football and basketball in high school, those words can't describe how beneficial that was for me as a person and as a teammate, and just for, personal developments. It's like, cannot say enough about how good sports are. And that's great to hear that for you, volleyball still serves a similar role like that in your life too, and the way for you to release the different stresses that you experience inside and outside of work. What do you hope social work looks like in 10 years?
It is essential in this field to have individuals who have experienced homelessness with that lived experience becoming social workers. BIPOC individuals meeting like the top level of licensure, being able to be in supervisory roles, that is going to do so much for this field. And it's going to diversify the field, but also it's going to directly impact the people we serve, because there will be more individuals that truly understand what those barriers look like when you go through them and how to get through them. But then it's also kind of an image of like, look, like I was here and I've totally self-actualized and I'm, supervising this whole group. But that's a really big thing.
Yeah, provide a lot of inspiration to those that are using those services. My final question for you today: what gives you hope for the future?
Oh, what gives me hope? What gives me hope for the future? I think for the future of what I do, I just think that it's the constant innovation that's happening in Hennepin County on addressing homelessness and getting people housed and supported, and keeping people housed. I think that really gives me a lot of hope. What also gives me a lot of hope is just constantly being able to be side by side with individuals and working, like problem solving and learning new things along the way, so that then I can use that the next time somebody's in that situation, I can be like, oh, I actually learned about this really random resource that I never knew about, and can like have that in my pocket for the next time. So that's what gives me hope.
Awesome. Well, Andrea, thank you for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Youthful Perspectives. Though I could cite many aspects I found important from this conversation, the most important for me was the value and understanding the potential each homeless person possesses. It's easy to view someone asking for money on a street corner as beneath you, but is that the kind of country we want to be? One that views those experiencing the lowest moment of their life as a lost cause? I don't think so. We must remember, homeless people are not a one-dimensional community that lacks the potential and agency to reverse course and thrive. With the right support system and resources, many can begin the long journey of achieving personal fulfillment. It's the tireless work from people like Andrea who help guide them to reaching this goal. I hope there will be many more social workers like Andrea Hansen-Miller who continue this essential work over the years to come, for it truly is noble work. This is Mason Bierbaum, signing off.